It was a quiet Friday night. The rain fell steadily, tapping against the windows in a soft, rhythmic pattern. The family had settled into their usual evening routine. The parents were sipping tea in the living room, while the children were tucked upstairs, absorbed in their homework and online games. Everything felt peaceful, almost too peaceful. Then came a knock. Just one at first, soft, almost hesitant. The parents exchanged glances. It was late, and no one was expected. Another knock followed, louder this time, impatient. The father rose, wrapped a shawl around his shoulders, and stepped outside. Standing on the porch was a man in drenched clothes. He looked exhausted, shivering from the cold. His hair plastered to his forehead, eyes slightly wild yet pleading. "I'm sorry to bother you," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm lost. Can I stay for just a little while?" The father hesitated. There was something unusual about him. His accent was slightly foreign, his tone quiet but intense. Still, the mother insisted. "It's raining heavily. We can't leave him out there." Reluctantly, the father nodded, letting the stranger inside. The man's presence seemed to suck the warmth from the room. He didn't smile, didn't chat, just followed silently as he was shown to the spare room. The children peeked from the staircase, curiosity battling unease. Their parents reassured them, but even as they spoke, a small knot of anxiety formed in the pit of their stomachs. Something about the stranger felt off. Too still, too quiet. As the front door clicked shut behind him, the soft glow from the hallway light revealed his figure standing there for a moment longer than necessary, as if studying them. The family tried to shrug off the feeling, but deep down, they sensed that inviting a stranger into their home that night might be the beginning of a very long nightmare. The stranger had settled into the spare room, but from the moment he entered, the house felt different. The air was heavier, the usual warmth of the living room dimmed. He didn't unpack much, just a small, worn backpack, neatly placed in the corner. The family tried to make conversation, but his responses were minimal, monosyllabic at best. During dinner, he sat rigidly, barely touching his food. When the parents asked about his journey, he simply nodded or shook his head. It wasn't rudeness. There was a strange intensity in his eyes, an unspoken alertness that made them uneasy. The children whispered amongst themselves upstairs, daring to peek from the staircase now and then. He never made eye contact with them, but somehow it felt like he was watching. Hours passed. The stranger spent most of his time in the living room, sitting perfectly still, staring at nothing, yet observing everything. When the family tried to learn more about him, he remained silent. A question about where he was from? Silence. A query about his travel plans? Silence. Even the weather discussion ended with a mere nod or a brief murmur. Little by little, tension seeped into the house. The dog, normally friendly and calm, avoided him entirely, growling softly when he walked past. Oddly, the clock ticking on the wall seemed louder when he was in the room. The parents whispered that maybe he was just shy or exhausted, but unease gnawed at them. That night, before everyone went to bed, the father glanced toward the hallway and saw the stranger standing perfectly still, staring at the ceiling as if listening. A chill ran down his spine. Something about this man wasn't right. The silence he carried wasn't peaceful. It was waiting, calculating. The family went to bed with a restless unease. Each creak of the floorboards, each rustle of the curtains made them flinch. They couldn't shake the feeling that the quiet stranger in their home was hiding something far dark. The next morning, the family tried to settle into a normal day, but the tension from last night lingered. Small things began to feel off. A set of keys was missing from the kitchen counter. The children's toys were moved into odd places. At first, They blamed themselves, thinking they had misplaced things. But a creeping suspicion gnawed at the parents. The stranger had been the only one moving around the house. Throughout the day, subtle anomalies continued. Doors that had been closed were slightly ajar. Drawers left shut seemed tampered with. The dog, who usually followed the family around happily, growled when the stranger passed by. Every step he took seemed deliberate, silent, unnervingly precise. By mid-afternoon, the mother noticed the stranger lingering near the windows, watching the street with an intensity that made her skin prickle. When she asked him about it, he gave no answer, just a faint shrug. The father began to feel a growing sense of unease. Something about the way the stranger moved through the house wasn't normal. It was calculated. That evening, as darkness settled outside, the family started hearing noises upstairs. Footsteps creaked lightly, but when they checked, the stranger was sitting calmly on the couch downstairs, staring blankly ahead. Doors they knew had been shut were slightly ajar, and some items, wallets, jewelry, were missing. The children whispered in fear, huddling together, while the parents tried to rationalize the strange occurrences. But the weight of the silent stranger's presence made rational explanations harder to grasp. Each tick of the clock amplified the tension. By bedtime, everyone was on edge. The stranger didn't eat, didn't talk, barely moved. Yet somehow, he made his presence felt in every corner of the home. It became increasingly clear something about him was dangerous. Their instinct screamed that the stranger wasn't just quiet. He was hiding something, and the longer. Late that evening, just as the family was trying to calm their nerves, the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, flashing insistently across the screen. The father hesitated but picked up, unsure what to expect. On the other end, a man's voice was urgent, almost panicked. "Is there a man staying at your house tonight?" the caller asked. The father's heart skipped a beat. "Yes," he said cautiously. "Why? Who is this?" The voice explained quickly. Earlier that day, someone matching the stranger's description had been spotted in a nearby town, breaking into homes. The caller gave details that sent shivers down the father's spine. Dark hair plastered to the head, a rain-soaked jacket, a distinct gait. The stranger they had invited in could be dangerous. The mother, overhearing the conversation, clutched her children tightly. Their quiet house, once safe, suddenly felt like a trap. The stranger, who had been silently watching them in the living room, now seemed more sinister than ever. His expressionless face gave nothing away, but every instinct in the family screamed danger. They tried to reason, thinking maybe it was a coincidence, but the phone call lingered in their minds. The stranger's calm, deliberate movements suddenly became terrifying. He didn't react to the call, didn't acknowledge it, as if he already knew what was being said. Fear gripped the household. The children huddled together upstairs while the parents whispered about what to do. Should they confront him? Call the police immediately? The longer they waited, the heavier the tension grew. Each creak of the floorboards seemed magnified. Every shadow felt like it was moving toward them. The phone call had changed everything. The stranger wasn't just a lost traveler anymore. He was a potential threat, and the family knew their night had just begun, and it might not end safely. She didn't look at him. She didn't explain. She just whispered, "Don't worry about that." And that was the moment he knew something was very wrong. Night fell, heavier than usual. Rain hammered against the windows, and the wind howled through the trees outside. The house, already tense, seemed to hold its breath. Every shadow was darker, every corner more foreboding. The family tried to stay together in the living room, but the stranger's presence made even proximity uncomfortable. Suddenly, the lights flickered. One moment the room was bathed in warm light. The next it plunged into shadow. The children clutched each other, fear creeping into their voices. The stranger didn't flinch. He remained seated, calm, almost eerily unaffected by the sudden blackout. Then a soft creak echoed from upstairs. The parents froze. The stranger was downstairs. He had been there the whole time. The sound grew louder, deliberate. A door opened somewhere above them, then closed. The family's hearts raced. The father grabbed a flashlight and cautiously tiptoed toward the staircase. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating nothing but empty hallway walls. Yet the sense of being watched intensified. The stranger's calm, expressionless gaze from the living room seemed to follow them, as if he were anticipating every move. Every small sound, the rustle of curtains, the tick of the clock, the soft groan of the floorboards, echoed unnaturally. It was as if the house itself had become a trap. Fear made the parents hyper-aware of every shadow. They whispered instructions to the children, urging silence. The stranger's sudden silence, combined with the house's unnatural noises, made the atmosphere suffocating. Each second stretched endlessly. The family realized they were no longer alone in a safe home. The stranger's quiet, methodical behavior, combined with the unexplained nighttime noises, turned the familiar rooms into a labyrinth of tension. By the early hours of the morning, the family's nerves were stretched to the breaking point. Every sound, every creak, shuffle, or whisper felt magnified. The stranger, still calm and silent, had settled into the house as if it were his own. Something inside the parents told them it was time to investigate. They decided to check the spare room where he had been staying. With cautious steps, the father crept to the door, the mother following closely behind. The stranger was nowhere to be seen in the room. Instead, his backpack lay open on the bed. Curiosity mixed with dread as the father approached. Inside, they found a collection of items that made their stomachs churn. IDs belonging to strangers, house keys that didn't belong to anyone they knew, and photographs of unknown homes were scattered inside. It was clear this wasn't a simple traveler. They were looking at evidence of someone who had been living a hidden, invasive life. The mother held her breath as she picked up a photo. Each image captured a home. Empty driveways, darkened windows, families unaware of being watched. The pattern was undeniable. The stranger wasn't merely lost. He had been observing, planning, and possibly targeting other households. Panic surged through the family. They realized the extent of the danger they had invited into their home. The stranger's calm demeanor now seemed menacing. His silence was intentional. It was a tool to hide his actions. A sudden sound behind them, a soft, deliberate step, made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. They spun around and froze. There, standing silently in the hallway, was the stranger. He had been watching them the entire time, aware that they had discovered his secret. Fear turned to urgency. The family understood that this night could end in disaster if they didn't act fast. Their once safe home had transformed into a place of imminent danger, and every second counted. The family's hearts pounded in their chests. The stranger stood in the hallway, expressionless, watching them with cold, calculated eyes. Every instinct screamed that they were in immediate danger. Panic surged through the parents, and they knew they had no time to hesitate. The father whispered urgently to the mother, and they motioned to the children. "We need to get out now," he hissed. The children clutched each other, trembling, but followed obediently. Every step was careful, silent, as if the house itself might betray them. The stranger didn't move immediately. He remained in the shadows, observing, waiting. Then, almost imperceptibly, he began to follow. The family's fear spiked. Each creak of the floorboards under their feet seemed deafening. They could hear his soft, deliberate footsteps echoing behind them. Reaching the living room, the father grabbed the front door handle. The rain had eased slightly, but the dark night outside offered little comfort. With one last glance at the stranger, he yanked the door open. They spilled out into the cold night air, sprinting down the driveway, their shoes splashing in puddles. Behind them, a faint sound of movement indicated the stranger was still inside, but he didn't chase. It was almost as if he enjoyed watching them flee. Heart pounding, the family didn't stop until the streetlights were behind them and the house loomed silently in the distance. Once they reached a safe distance, they paused, gasping for breath, clinging to one another. The night, once ordinary, had become the most terrifying hours of their lives. Their home, which had seemed like a sanctuary, had transformed into a place of fear and uncertainty.